How's it going, everyone? It's Prashaun here. I'm on the YouTubes, if you don't know me. Small little channel, but I'm growing. I've been playing Marvel Snap maybe a month before launch. I had to sneak in, download BlueStacks. I think I'm in the Philippines still in Marvel Snap, not in the US, since I had to do it the Renegade way. I have tons of games in. I think over 33,000 games in. Probably have 19,000 wins, so like around a 53% win rate. But I play a lot of games, so I've seen the meta change this way, that way. So I'm ready to talk about it.
Good morning. Hi. Welcome. Everyone's still caffeinating right now. We're all trying to get in there. Exactly. You can cheers, Banks. It's fine. So, for those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as It's Guest Gaming. I am not a beta player, so I came in a little bit later. I got dragged in by this guy in December, so I'm much later than a lot of the players who are here on this panel, but I may not have that beta experience, but watching the meta shift, especially most recently in the tournament side of things, is one of the things I really am looking forward to talking about, because we're seeing effects from these kinds of events and how they're impacting literally the entire game. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Absolutely. So I am DefaultDan. I was here from day one beta. My background really is TCG games. Played Magic for 20 plus years. Got to throw that in for this guy over here. But even within that, I played any kind of TCG that's come out. All the DBZ, TCGs that have come out. There was a Final Fantasy one. Looking forward to Lorcana pretty soon. Things like that. So love card games, and I've loved to see that evolution of Snap and even where it's going. So that's kind of my background there.
Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Paper. I'm a Twitch streamer, twitch.tv/paper with 2 R's. I am a closed beta player. I've been playing this game since the first day that they released it. And yeah, I do deck build videos on YouTube, Paper Snap. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about the meta in this panel.
I'm W. I used to be known as WWLOS, Double-Los, Wawalos. We've just made it W because it's way easier. I'm kind of just known as a guy who posts deck lists on Twitter. I've kind of been transitioning that back into Twitch because I used to stream a long time ago when I was more of a Hearthstone player, different game back in the day. But I'm trying to into content, so you can find me on all those things, but my Twitter is where you'll find most of my stuff. So yeah.
So what we want to kind of start with today is, without giving a full history lesson and just being like, all right, good morning, let's talk history. I mean, just think back to beta and how different it was, because, we have a couple of people here on the panel that have really focused heavily on, okay, I started day one, like Paper, you started day one, you saw, and we've only heard legend of the toxicity of things like Mr. Negative and Nova, and how Second Dinner also had to react to seeing these kinds of metas so quickly, because yes, the game gets play tested, they try all these things, and then they put it in our hands. And we go, here's the game, let's break it in half. So, like, from your experience talking about what beta was like, and kind of let people know too, like, I know about Nova and Mr. Negative, but how did that affect your beginning impressions of the game?
Yeah, so the first impressions of the game was that it was fun just to unlock new cards. Like, just the collection system at the beginning was really fun. Everybody had basically the same cards because we're in Series 1 and 2 still for the first, month of the game. So we really didn't have a lot of variety in the deck builds that you can do. So it was really just Moon Girl was a 3-cost, Devil Dino was a 3-cost 3 power, and then Nova gave everything +2 power when destroyed. So it was basically you had to run Carnage Nova, Moon Girl, Devil Dinosaur every single deck, and if you didn't, you were going to have a bad time because you were going to lose by like 30 points in every location. So we had 2 Devil Dinosaurs that you can play on turn 6 since they were doubled by Moon Girl, and they were 3 costs. So the intro meta, Binks and I have a lot of experience. We were fighting back and forth to get Infinite in that first beta season, and it was only like 2 weeks long for that first season. So it was really competitive to try to get to Infinite in that first season before the first season pass came out with the reset. And it didn't really it didn't really ruin my opinion of the game at all. As destructive as that meta was, everybody had to play it because it's the only cards that we had. You quickly got into whoever got Sarah first was going to be really, really good in Series 3. So you kind of move into that. Sarah was my very last card in Series 3, so I couldn't really do much after that or into that, so I had to scrounge together stuff. But yeah, the Devil Dinosaur stuff early on was very, very strong, and it was pretty much impossible to compete with. And we've had some metas that we'll talk about later where things were almost impossible to compete with. So yeah, it didn't ruin my opinion of the game at all. The collection system was addicting enough to keep me going, to unlock new cards. So.
No, I mean, again, talking about some of those cards and some of the changes even they made back then with, then Devil Dino going to be a 3-0 because they were going to fix him, remember? So they were going to fix him, make him a 3-0. He didn't get the starting 3. And then Negative happened. And Negative was like, oh, that's cute. Let's make him a 0-3 now with Mystique, with, who's another 0-3 at that point. Like, it ended up being a lot of fun, though, because it was a lot of crazy things you could do with this. We had cards like Magic, right? So, like, Magic used to be able to use on turn 6. Again, I still think you should be able to use her on turn 6.
No.
But you had a lot of these cards where, like, in the heyday of beta, we got to do just fun stuff, different stuff. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. And to your point, once you got to Series 3, you got to have a lot of fun because you would unlock like Ultron, or you'd unlock like these crazy cards at the time that would completely change everything you were doing. So definitely had a lot of fun with that. Prashaun, so you were saying you got in a little bit after the start of beta, but you still had to have some fun there. What was your experience?
It was a grind, a hard grind. I think I just had my newborn, or he wasn't born. Yes, I had a newborn. My wife hated me at the time because I was up until 5 in the morning just grinding away with my little kazoo deck, because that's the only cards I basically had. So during that time, it's like I want to switch my deck, but I don't have all the cards. I can't. I just have to stick with what I got. I just have to grind my way through until I get all the cards I want. I really wanted to play discard. I really wanted to, but I didn't have Hela. I didn't have. I think Lockjaw was one of the last cards I got. Wasp was one of the last cards I got. So I was like, dude, I have to stick with Kazoo. I have Kazar. I have Bishop. Let's roll with it. So it was like me just playing mini games, looking up people on YouTube, trying to get deck ideas, trying to go through and see what they're playing, what can I mix and match, things of that nature. And then eventually that's how I got into YouTube, because I was like, I'm decent at the game. I play a lot. I play tons of games. I win. Let's do this. So basically it was dark times back then. And then I played a few months before the game went live. Yeah. So I had to figure out how to buy season passes, which sucked. I had to go into Google and convert my money to the Philippines and then try to get the season pass that way. It was horrible. I was like, gosh, how come I didn't sign up for this earlier? It would have been so much easier. Even now, when I go in, it still has the Philippine flag, and then I have to convert it. So I don't know. It is what it is, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I was playing Kazar in the beginning.
And you said the season passes, and when we kind of because I know many of us were not beta, I wasn't. And the second you could finally start playing the game and you got your season pass, you think back to once the game launched, and season passes really started to define the game. Just the specific Silver Surfer and Zabu seasons and how impactful those cards were is what started to change how meta was, because it was very simple, like you guys were talking about in beta. Okay, you unlock the cards, and this kind of temporarily makes a meta that they might have to change 1 or 2 things in the patch. But then now we start this cadence of every single week, new card, and we saw the progression change where, hey, I got this new card. It's the new thing. You can unlock it by doing whatever it is, season pass or on the track or whichever you prefer. And that's now the new meta. It's, hey, you've got the new thing, or you can't counter the new thing. That's going to redefine the meta. And then, well, the season pass is there. How many Dokken decks do you go up, for example, currently in the first 2 days? and then it dies off because of things that have changed progressively. So W, I'll throw it to you on this. We look at like those eras, what we'll call the pre-OTA meta. Every single week, brand new card comes on down, redefines the meta. As someone who switched from another game, creating that strategy every single time, because it still is relevant to a degree today. How do you look at a new card then versus how do you look at a new card now also?
Well, and I'll get into it a little bit more later, but it's so funny how in this game, compared to some of the other games, like a day is like a month of a meta sometimes. Like when I was planning for this tournament this weekend, I made this list. It feels great. You know, I test against a certain version of a list that won a big tournament 3 days ago. Lambie posts his version that has running a tech card that messes with what I'm doing. Like yesterday when I land, like getting on a plane, I see this and now I have to switch this. And like, it's just constant with this, you know, especially with like creator channels. But going back to your question, like, yeah, when there's just new, because I forgot to mention, I came in end of October, like right before the end of that season, like downloaded it on the App Store. I was like, oh, I'll try this out. Maybe this will pique my interest in card games again. Now I'm here. And yeah, the server especially, like, you know, it created a situation where you either are playing the surfer or you're playing against it. And like, that's always the case in the first 2 days, right? Like with Doc, and it was easy. Now we're like gonna play armor stuff if we want to. We can play however you want to, because armor is one of those cards that you can put into a lot of different archetypes. So it creates an open meta in a lot of ways, but you're also gonna see, you know, there's one big thing there, which is kind of interesting. And now it's actually transitioned into this meta we kind of have now, where it's more open than usual. I think that's an interesting thing with a card like Dakin, which is a little more not as played as like a card like Surfer on its release or Zabu on its release. It hasn't made a lasting impact itself, but it made a lasting impact on the meta because a lot more experimentation was made around it, and that created a very interesting meta like we have right now. So that kind of stuff is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and like basically exactly what you said. The meta is super interesting because these new cards keep coming out and they make people experiment with those cards. In the beta, there were not, like Wave was the first card in the beta, but nobody really had the cards to utilize Wave in the way that she's utilized now. Then the other season pass cards were like Daredevil, Nick Fury, Miles, all these cards that really weren't affecting the meta in any way when they came out. So it's just been interesting to see after the beta seasons that now they're doing Zabu, Surfer, cards that are actually like not destroying the meta, but completely flipping the meta on its head from the previous meta before that card was coming out. So it's really interesting to see the progression of how the power that they're placing in these season pass cards. And yeah, it's just been really interesting, and it puts me on my toes every single time a new card comes out because we're getting them every week now. It's really interesting to see what happens every single week. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, from just cards, you know, adjusting the meta, season passes, things like that. I mean, we have patches now. We have OTAs. We went through a couple weeks, essentially a month and a half of like an OTA every week, right? So we were like, oh, we like this change, but then they're just like flooding us with OTAs. They're just figuring out every single card that's either being overplayed, underplayed, and just tweaking them. So in a lot of those cases, we didn't have enough time to test, like, was that a good OTA? Because by the time we start to test it, we've already got, you know, the next one, and it's like, oh, here's another shiny toy I need to go play with, and we didn't figure it out. So there's definitely a lot of these cards, you know, that we end up seeing later start to come out, like Silk. Like when Silk was dropped, like we're like, this isn't a good card, it's whatever. But then now, you know, Lamy comes out with his deck, does well in a tournament with it, and you start playing, you're like, actually Silk's pretty good, being able to put in there, whether you're playing her in a lockdown with Storm or you're just doing, you know, just a 5 power and they can't predict where it's going, right? So it's always fun to see not just the cards, but even just these OTA changes where they say, you know, Black Bolt stature, right? It's being played too much. Let's take 1 power off. And then the next day, nobody's playing them, but it's like they're still good. Like, so OTAs are always interesting just because of those quick changes that they can do with numbers as well as, patches. And I love the cadence they're at. But, again, guess with you kind of coming in, you didn't get to see some of the crazy stuff because we did get patches in the beta, which did change stuff. But now we have a really good cadence with it. And I know with you writing your articles and stuff, having to look at these weekly and monthly, like what are your thoughts on the OTAs and how they're handling them and different aspects and how that shifts meta?
I mean, it definitely makes my life a little easier writing articles because I have time. But like playing on the ladder, like I use Venom all the time as the perfect example of that because Venom to me was the meta where they a made meta due to an OTA change. And we had the time to say, okay, this 2 extra power here, what's gonna happen? And now, I mean, you go on the ladder right now, most people are playing Destroy still because it was that impactful of a change. They make a little change here and there to 1 or 2 cards to tell you, hey, use this or stop using this. Black Bolt Stature. Another one where it's like, hey, everybody's running this and they're dominating every single thing. You remove 1 power and then nobody played it for about maybe a month, I want to say. Maybe a month that people kind of said, okay, sure, this is weak now comparatively. And now half the people today are running that combo in some deck because they're like, okay, I can live with losing 1 or 2 power. The developers have basically found out with these OTA changes that we need time as players to figure out if I'm going to go on ladder, is this something I'm going to battle against, and how do I have to adjust to it? Rather than, you go week to week to week, and right now it kind of feels like that in the tournament scene nowadays where tournament to tournament to tournament, this is what won, make a change. This is what won, make a change. That's how it used to feel with OTAs, where here's the new change. Okay, it works great. Oh, no, there's another one. All right, let's try this one. Okay, and now there's another one. So I think this new cadence of every other week or so, I mean, that's important for us as players to actually ingest and get games under our belt to finally say, this is a good deck. Or, I mean, for many of us as creators as well, we want our videos to be longer and evergreen. We want, if you put, X amount of hours into a video, you want it to get a lot of time out there. But if the meta is changing this fast too, people aren't going to watch the content and people are going to play the game less also. I mean, and I wanted to bring up a specific point with that with you because you have a lot more hours into ranked. And ranked deck build, if there's anything you get from this conversation, please, ranked deck building is different than Conquest and tournament deck building. They are completely different styles, and you have a lot of experience in ranked. So now we've got the OTAs in, we understand, okay, let's tweak a little bit here, let's find a new meta here. From the ranked side first, and then if you want to spill into like today's event, when you have tournaments, how do you go about deck building knowing what the OTAs are going to be doing to new cards, and do you adjust to it differently on each game mode?
So with that, like playing in ranked a lot, you have to think about the spotlight locations or the hot locations for the weekend, which sucks. There's a time where it creates a meta for the weekend. For instance, when peak happened, I lost so many ranks because everyone was playing negative. So it was whoever got their cards out before you. And so I lost maybe 10, 15 ranks in one weekend. And then the next weekend, it's Onslaught Citadel. So everyone's playing Patriot. So you have to figure out what's that one card that can make me different from everybody else. So some people were playing Iron Man, just a surprise card here or there, or everyone was playing Super Scroll, because Super Scroll just came out. So it's like, what can make you different? What one card can you play that's a little bit different from everyone else that gives you that edge? Possibly. It could be a make or break card. You could probably put Shadow King in there. I know that's happened a few times. But it's like, what can you play that's sustainable and lasts? You don't want to switch decks every 2 seconds just because you're on a losing streak. Like there's times I put the game down, I'm like, I can't do this. Like I'm at 95, like I go down to like 87 or something. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm losing too much. So I put the game down, and then after the weekend, whenever that location's done, I go back to where I was and grind. And then I make it. Or even on the ladder now, like you're playing against a bunch of people that are great in the beginning, and then eventually they make infinite, and you're still playing the people that aren't infinite, and then eventually you make it infinite like a week later. So it's just the grind, keeping the deck that you think is good on ladder, and then sticking with it. So.
Yeah, so like with the OTAs, it was kind of annoying, like one after another every week, but it was also annoying that like we had some metas last a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, because they like wouldn't touch Shuri because they were afraid of doing something that would make the meta, I don't know, too destructive or something. So there are benefits and downsides to the current cadence. I do think we're at a pretty nice spot now compared to where we were in the previous two kind of iterations of balance. Specifically with the Shuri meta, that was when I played the game the least, I think. Even like over Zabu meta, like the Shuri meta was very annoying to play against just because like Armor and Cosmo were just two cards that would protect the lane completely. And they just refused to touch her. They would do like, oh, let's remove one power from Red Skull. Well, that's not going to do that much. He becomes a 28, like it's whatever. So yeah, I think right now we're in a pretty good spot in terms of like the cadence of everything. Just going through those growing pains of like 3 months of the same meta was something else.
Yeah, and part of that is like at the time with that situation specifically, we really did have nothing to stop that perfect line. Like even now, one of the reasons I think it's, easier to avoid these situations is like for that situation, Echo exists now. Even if Echo isn't exactly the most playable card, it'd be interesting to see if Echo existed then, if that same oppressiveness would have been in place. So I think like as time goes on, that's a situation we're running into. We have more cards to address these meta monsters, and maybe that's why the meta monsters are dwindling, because we really haven't had a situation like that since, and that's hopefully the future. But it's funny going off what Guest was saying earlier. These situations where like we'll like have these nerfs, these little slight nerfs on these cards, we often are so overreactionary on these things. Like after Darkhawk and Zabu were nerfed and like Rockslide, there was like still a few days where we can't play that now.
Yeah.
And like, it's still the 3 best card combo in the game possibly at times. Like it's funny how quickly just one point will make us say, oh, that's not a thing we got now. But I think it's just they push us in a direction, okay, now test this. And you can always come back to that. But we're like, the developers help us a little bit in that way, which is good. But if you ever want to be savvy, if they nerf something and it still looks good, just play it. You're going to be the first one to realize it, and that's a good thing. You can be on top of it. But
No, absolutely. And we talked about, not just cards and the OTAs and patches now. We started to talk about like the different modes. So you mentioned when we look at ladder, right? We look at ladder. Ladder is usually defined for 48 hours or a couple days, whatever it is, depending on the style of location being that featured location, right? And we've got new cards that can help with that and/or take that away, like with Legion and even Storm and things like that. But as we look at that, right? So ladder has a different meta, and that usually is driven by that. We have Conquest, right? So Conquest is fairly new to Marvel Snap and really being pushed here, and it's different. It's when I kind of look at these 3 different modes, and I'm talking about tournaments as well as that third mode, you kind of have these different things. So ladder, there's the surprise, right? So like with ladder, it's all right, I've got the cards, but the only way to really fight that location is potentially remove that location or play really heavy into that location and cross your fingers that they can't take it away. So, when we look at kind of ladder Conquest tournaments, Conquest is a little different. It's the surprise. Can I get the 8 cubes because they don't know what's going on? And then in tournaments, most tournaments are open lists. So the surprise is not really there unless they forgot to look at your list before they went into the match, right? So you're not going to surprise them with that Legion or that Kang or whatever that they know it's there. So I know as we're kind of getting through, the panel and stuff, I kind of want to hit because we're here at SnapCon. We've got the big tournament going on. Again, we talked about ladder for a minute. I just want to kind of go around the room and talk about kind of the tournament, the Conquest meta. What do you guys kind of like about it? What's one card that maybe people are like sleeping on with that meta that's maybe not there? Maybe they aren't. Maybe people know about it, but you know.
So for Conquest specifically, there is kind of a similarity between ladder and Conquest, where if you with ladder you want that surprise factor, right? So there's different cards, like I like Dr. Octopus. You put him in Conquest, oftentimes it's not that great. Your opponent will keep their Shang-Chi in their hand. They'll purposely play exactly the amount of cards that they need to play, so they guarantee Shang-Chi would come out on turn 5, that kind of stuff. So Doc Ock, not great in Conquest most of the time. However, if it is in like Conquest, closed deck list, you can't see what your opponent's playing, you can get 8 cubes really easily on that first game, and then you just got to win like one more game. So there is a sort of surprise factor in a more competitive setting. Like W and I just played yesterday in the opening tournament, and we both, at the end of the first 4 rounds, we both lost 2 health total. I'm not going to surprise him with a Doc Ock for 8 cubes anymore at that point. He knows my deck at that point. So in terms of cards that are kind of slept on, if you know who I am and you know the decks that I've posted, Shadow King is my favorite card right now, I think. He counters a lot of decks, all the Surfer stuff, all the Angela Kitty stuff. He's really, really good, and it's a card that in Conquest or in tournaments I want to play in like every single deck, because he is a card that will just win you that first 8 cube game. Your opponent doesn't expect it, and then now they're playing on the back foot the entire time. So I think in that way, there is a similarity in deck building for both ladder and Conquest and tournament, where you do want to get that surprise factor, but you also want a deck that after your opponent knows that surprise factor, you can still pull out some victories that way.
Yeah, and I call that card like your cube stealer in these things, especially in closed. And our match yesterday was still closed, and it's a really good example of this. And if anyone wants to watch it back, you can go to DefaultDan's stream yesterday. It's the first match of the day early on, but he's right. I think game 1, turn 5, I don't want to show my cube stealer, but I snap. Like, you have to make them pay for that cube stealer. If you're playing your surprise card in like a closed list Conquest or a tournament and you aren't snapping, you're doing yourself such a disservice. They have to pay for it. Even if it's a boomer snap, don't let them just see it. You need to get cubes out of those specific tech cards, those different cards that will get you closer to the finish line. So game 1, I snap on 5, making him pay to see my weirdness. He retreats. Game 2, he does the same to me, 1 cube. Game 3, I do it back to him, I retreat. Game 4, same thing, and we're going to high stakes, just with 8 cubes left each. And I haven't seen his Doc Ock, he hasn't seen my Wave, or my Claw, which are my 2 like cube stealers in my list, and I haven't seen his Shadow King or Doc Ock at that point. We're making each other pay to see these big moments that will shift this game wherever it might end up. And, it took a few more, and I think eventually you saw my Wave first, and it's like almost like whoever sees that first gets that advantage. But it was a really good set, and a really good example of that. And Wave is like my card right now. I think that in the meta, people forgot exists on all these games. Or like Kitty is still, if you want to stop move, there's Kitty with Wave. And they've worked all game to make that thing 6 power, and you're just laughing. It's great. So.
Yeah, as we all know, Proving Grounds, that's when you do the testing, you do the good old snap and dap. But once you get out of Proving Grounds, that's when it gets a little bit more competitive. So typically, I do stick with what you know. Like, I don't go too much outside of the box. I'll stick a Cosmo in there, Armor in there just in case. Just playing those tech cards. And then we all have deck trackers for the most part when we're playing at home. So it's like saving that one card for the end, or just playing it once, or having them think the whole time is like, are they going to play the Shang-Chi? Are they going to play Shang-Chi now? When are they going to play? Where are they going to play it? So things of that nature is like how I go about in Conquest. I pretty much keep it simple, and then I keep that one surprise card just for the end to just throw them off guard and steal cubes.
Yeah, I think just to kind of wrap it up for everybody here, when you're looking at the meta, as you can hear from everybody here on this oddly coincidentally bearded panel, that we very much understand now at this point, after seeing the game progress for the last several months, we now have OTA changes, we now understand the cycle of featured locations, we understand that you can go online and see, here's the deck that won this. Take in that content for what it is in that moment, because you're gonna see, like, whatever happens here today, whoever wins this event, this is just the first ripple of what's gonna affect the entire game, but now it's only gonna affect it maybe for the next 3 days, a week at most, until the next big tournament comes on out, and then, well, okay, Lammy move is no longer a big deal. Now it's,
You got the brood deck.
yeah, this brood deck that, completely takes over everything. So know what game mode you're in, know what happened recently, whether it's your favorite creator or just lots of time and experience in that one game mode. When all else fails, do one of two things when it comes to the meta. Know your deck. Play your deck that you've played inside and out. This is your favorite deck. You know all your play lines. That will almost always do the best for you, no matter what's going on in the game. Secondly, when all else fails, just play Patriot. So for the Meta Matters panel, once again, we thank you guys coming in. This is day 2 here of SnapCon. Felicity, this is yours at this point, where we say thank you so much for having us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the tournament today.